Today's guest experienced the loss and a lack of purpose in an empty nest. She thought she had accomplished everything she was meant to accomplish with her big life goal of being a parent. Now she thought she had nothing left to live for or hope for, but she discovered she was wrong. She just needed to get quiet with God and obey what He had been nudging her toward for many years. Tune in to this episode of Life Repurposed to find out what that was. Welcome to Midlife Repurposed. If you're craving inspiration, practical tips, and a renewed sense of purpose, you're in the right place. Here, we embrace the messy, uncertain, and sometimes downright challenging turns of midlife with a dose of humor and an unwavering belief that there's treasure to be found even in the tough stuff. I'm your host, Michelle Rayburn, an author who's passionate about uncovering hope in the most unexpected places. Let's repurpose this season of life together. Ruthie Gray is a wife, Gigi, empty nester, and content marketing consultant for Christian creatives, and she hosts the Authentic Online Marketing Podcast. So easy, your mom or Carol Brady can do it. Ruthie is also the author of Empty Nest Awakening, Weaving the Threads of Your Passions into Purpose. She's also a contributor of a chapter in my new book, This Reimagined Empty Nest. Today we're going to be talking about Ruthie's journey from being a mom to moving to that second phase of life and how she discovered that God had another purpose for her life in the midst of it. Here's my chat with Ruthie Gray. Ruthie, I'm so glad to have you here today. Last week, I was on your show, and this week you're on my show, and so the roles are reversed. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I just feel like we're continuing the conversation. It was so much fun last time, and I'm sure it will be this time.
I think so too. And for the listener out there, you don't know what I'm talking about yet, but in the show notes, you're going to find the link to that chat with Ruthie. Ruthie hosts the Authentic Online Marketing Podcast. And I know that your target audience, Ruthie, is people who are in that online space, and mine is people who are repurposing their lives, and they actually really mesh together well.
They coincide for sure.
Yeah. So when you think about online marketing, people are probably thinking about those business executives who have giant marketing teams and they're doing all this promotive stuff. Is that what you have, Ruthie?
No, not at all. So I explain Instagram in terms that we midlife mamas can understand. I'm not one of the young gurus that say, hit this button and tweak that and then go over here and do that. And it's like all within the span of 20 seconds. I'm going to break it down and make it simple. Our tagline is, so easy, your mom or Carol Brady could do it. So we talk about Instagram, we talk about newsletters, we talk about all the related marketing things too, like podcasting, also writing and authorship and things of that nature, which you talked about last time on our show, and about effective writerly systems that you can put in place as an author and potential author. So my people, though, that come to me they're my age and older and younger. I would say the demographic is 45 up to 65, even 70.
So when your kids were at home, were they the ones you went to when you had a tech question?
Yes.
And so they left you.
Here's
and
what
is
happened.
That where the inspiration came for your show?
Well, I had to learn somehow. So my daughter, Haley, used to work for me at Authentic Online Marketing. She's the one that got me into Instagram. She said, Mom, you're going to love it. You should get on here. And she was right. And that's how I was a natural on Instagram. And that's how I caught on and started. I didn't mean to, but I started teaching people because they started asking me. So then I was like, well, maybe I could do something with this. So that's how my business grew. But it really started way, way back there before they left when I started blogging. And I realized there were some techie things about blogging that I really liked. Now, my husband will tell you that I can create any kind of technical issue that the developers have never even thought of yet. I'm the one. However, I have been able to move, past that in the arenas that I want to. I understand what I want to. The rest of it, everybody else can turn the TV on and the DVR and whatever else they want to do. But I even went so far as to build my own website back 10 years ago on WordPress. And
that's impressive.
So I've learned a lot down through the years and actually like it. Like I said, as long as it's in my arena.
So let's rewind a little bit to when the kids were at home before you were even thinking about podcasting, or maybe even before you were thinking about blogging. Tell me a little bit about what life was like when the kids were at home.
Life was great. I loved it. I loved when everybody got old enough to get the joke and they could feed and water themselves, shower themselves,
Yes.
all of that, and do their own laundry. Everybody did their own laundry. Even the 9-year-old
My house
did her
too.
That's the way to do it. But I worked my way out of a job eventually, in that they were leaving. So I was trying to really soak up those last few years because those were my favorites, the teen years and the young adult years and even the middle school years. So I had started blogging, just a family blog, and it was fun. And I was just doing it as a hobby. And I sensed the Holy Spirit wanting me to go more public and start writing publicly. And I know now that was the plan he had for me to get me out of the pit that I inadvertently dropped into in grief that I wasn't expecting when they started all leaving. And so that was the beginnings of it, was blogging and then building that blog and learning new things.
Were you mostly a stay-at-home mom?
I was, for the most part, yeah. There were times when I worked. I worked when my kids were in grade school and high school, but it was only like part-time at the Christian school where they went. I taught music and piano lessons and all that. And in high school, I worked in a physical therapy department and was actually a personal trainer and an aerobics instructor. But they were never full-time jobs. And so some of my kids' schooling years, I even homeschooled them, which I loved. So, yeah, it was a real different experience once they started leaving.
Yeah, and you have 4 children?
I do.
Okay, I only raised 2, but I did a lot of the same things because I left a career as a registered nurse and decided to stay home with the kids, which I thought was going to be for a while. And then it just, different factors in life led it to be the whole time that they were in school. But on the side, I was going to their school and accompanying the choir and accompanying the soul and ensemble students on the piano. And I had piano students coming to my house every week. So that was my way of using some skills and trying to help pay the bills. But I can relate to that thinking of like, okay, the kids are leaving home, and now, not that I would ever get bored. I just feel like I'm driven to do something more than like watch TV all day. So
right.
When you started to reimagine a little bit and think about what that next step would look like, what are some of the things that you had to wrestle through?
Well, at first I thought my life was over because I had achieved my life goal. It was really what I really, really wanted to do, was raise a family and raise them to independence. And then I did it. And so then I started looking backwards and behind me and thinking of all the memories, and just, we would drive by their school or by a pizza restaurant where we'd had a million birthday parties, and all these memories would flood back. And I did not plan to be depressed because I was so excited when my kids would reach new levels of independence. I was really blown away by this. But I really seriously was like, what am I going to do now? They don't need me really anymore, not like they did. And I just lacked purpose. But I realized that God had been really nudging me towards the next step that I was afraid of, by the way. And I kept putting it off for several years because I didn't want anyone to know about me. I didn't want to be public.
When the kids were leaving home, it was also the time when my hormones were just a mess. Like, I was in the worst part of perimenopause. And so I wouldn't say that I experienced what I would call depression, although my husband did. So I think it's important for us to know that every one of us experiences something different. But the littlest things would also make me cry, not just related to the kids, but those nostalgic moments, because it really is a change. Like you said, all the things that were part of your everyday life and the celebrations are different now. They're not gone, but they're very different when they're not at home every day. So then what did you do? How did you overcome some of that hesitancy about taking a next step?
Well, I started journaling a lot, and I started reading through the Bible as a whole. I picked up this Through the Year Bible, and I thought, you know what? I could do this. I have been a quitter of reading the whole Bible through many, many times, but I thought I can do this. And I started doing it, and I started blogging about it. Like I did a series called 52 Weeks, and I would just pick one passage for the week and write about it. And during that time, I started really leaning into prayer too. And really deep prayer and knee prayer and posturing. And I started mentoring younger moms online. That's when I built my parenting blog, RuthieGray.mom. And I wrote a book, a little ebook called Count to Nine Liberating Steps for Mom Frustration and Anger. And then I wrote another one that was called Stepping Stones for Moms, 8 Mindsets for the Mom Who Thinks She's Failing at Motherhood. And those, I just sold one yesterday, and this was back in 2017, and I don't even really push that stuff anymore, but it's circulating on Pinterest and everywhere. And as I took a step a little at a time and said yes to the call a little at a time, I got more and more courage. And God would lead me to the next thing. And I really found out that it was actually exciting and my life wasn't over after all.
What kind of feedback did you get from your family then when you started doing this?
Well, it was a lot of different mixed emotions. Now, my daughter that started me on Instagram was cheering me on. She was like, yeah, Mom, you could do this. But she's a cheerleader. One of my kids was like, what are you doing? You're spending so much time upstairs on your computer. Why do you do this? Don't you just want to play with the grandkids all the time? You can watch them. And I'm like, well, I know that you said on my podcast last week that was not that wasn't your vision to just watch grandkids all the time. And
yeah, wasn't my calling.
Some grandmas it is. It wasn't really mine either, although I did really watch them every day there for a while because there was no one else to do it. And I loved it, and I wouldn't take that back for the world. But ideally, I would watch them one day a week and then do my other writing and stuff the other days. And then there's my husband who's like, you're spending all your time on this. You deserve to be paid for this. Like, you have wisdom and it's okay to be paid. If you want a job, you can go get one and actually be paid. And I'm like, I don't want a job. I want to do what I want to do, which is right. And he's like, well, then you need to figure out how to do this and pay for things like software that you need to use and blog hosting and all this stuff. Because I just kept dipping into the coffers and buying this new, course and that new mastermind and things like that. So he kind of urged me to go beyond and dig a little deeper. And that's when I realized that I had this knack for Instagram. And that's when I kind of broadened my horizons. Never really letting go of my writing. I was always sharpening my skills with copywriting and writing captions on Instagram, writing newsletters. And then until God finally released me to last year, write my book.
Yeah, I want to hear about the book.
Empty Nest Awakening, Weaving the Threads of Your Passions into Purpose. And he said, this is the year you're going to write a book, 2023. And I knew that was my big goal. Every year I have a big goal that he gives me. So I knew that was the goal. I was like, great. And so I started telling all my followers on Instagram, I'm going to write a book. And they're like, yes, we can't wait to read it. And I was like, great. What should it be about? And I really crowdsourced. And what they wanted to know was how I got to where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, okay, let's try this and see. So I came up with 20 chapters, and it started out with, me being in depression when the kids started leaving, and then God nudging me to write, and then me being scared. There's a chapter in the book called "But I'm Scared." I don't know how. I don't know all the answers. What about caregiving? Because I've been a caregiver for going on 15 years now. At the time, I was caregiving both of my parents. I cared for both of them for 10 years. And was it selfish of me? And was it selfish to dream? And I worked through all these things in the book, and I started seeing a pattern for how I got here. And then I sort of made questions in a pattern for the readers to be able to fill out the questions and to journal at the end of the book. And God really spoke to me during the writing of that book, because even then I was like, Lord, is this selfish? Why do I like doing this? And I came to a thought one day, and it's not all about you. I give you the desire so that you can serve the people. And I even wrote a quote in my book: if God is calling you to something, he's calling you to someone. That was a big revelation for me.
If God is calling you to something, he's calling you to someone. And that someone is the listener who's right here with us today. They're one of the someones that you do this for. And I love that. So in the process of writing the book, the mechanics of writing a book is hard. The publishing process is hard. But I think one of the hardest things is when God starts to draw out our own stories and the vulnerability. That's one of my challenges. What challenges did you find as you were creating the actual content of the book?
Vulnerability for sure. I was thinking, what do I take out and what do I leave in? And I don't want to embarrass anybody in my family or take anyone's name in vain in my family. It doesn't want to be talked about. I think I did that well because I had my daughters read through it. So that was one challenge, and just making sure that I gave grace to certain family members and, didn't tell their story, but told my story.
What's been the feedback that you've had from people now who have read the book?
I've gotten a lot of positive feedback, and usually what they say is, this book isn't just for empty nesters. It's for anyone who is at a pivot in their life and they don't know the next step. Because it's almost like I take you through your background and your learned skills and your inherent traits and the way you were raised. Like I was raised in a Christian home. My dad was a pastor. Mom was the great community gatherer. She was the welcome wagon. And when people came in, they shook his hand on the way in, and he was always had a witty, warm word for them. But she connected the dots of everybody. Like there would be, Pam Williams would be sitting in a pew with her new baby, and Frances Vandal would come in and sit down in the pew ahead of her. And and Mom would come over and she would go around and talk to everybody that's sitting in their pews. Everybody comes in and sits in their pews, and she would be like, "Did you see Pam's new baby? And oh, this new person, you should meet them, blah, blah, blah." And so now, I'm an introvert. And I didn't
Me
want to be
too.
a part of that. Yeah, I know you said that last week. I didn't want to be a part of that. So I would just sit up on the front row because I always had to play the piano because even in the 6th grade, I was appointed as the church pianist because I was the pastor's daughter and no one else could do it.
I was in 10th grade, but you know what? It is kind of nice when everyone's socializing. You're still playing that postlude up there.
Yeah. That was my way out. But somehow I started doing that too. I started going around and talking to people too because of Mom's example. And I sort of mentored other girls younger than me to do the same in the youth group. And now that's kind of what I do. I'm a connector of people, and I build communities of like-minded Christian entrepreneurs to support each other and spread the word for the kingdom. Whether they're selling a beauty product or they're seamstress or whatever, we all realize there's a greater, higher goal in mind.
That's the beautiful thing, because we're not all called to be podcasters and we're not all called to be writers. We have our own space that God has called us to. And something very affirming is when we step into that and then somebody says something like, "You were here for me. You helped me connect with somebody." Maybe, like you said, somebody who's selling cosmetics helps somebody have a better self-image. Or when we as writers have somebody who says, "I felt like you were right in the room with me." That's always one of the things, like, when someone asks me if I got inside their head, I know that I have hit the mark on the calling. Yeah. And that's reaffirming. It says, yes, I did the right thing when I was scared and wrote that first book. What other ways have you seen God repurposing now through this, now that you've stepped into this new calling?
It's interesting. One of my readers said that she thought she was missing out. There was something she was supposed to be doing now that she was in empty nest, especially according to social media. And she said, "I read your book. I filled out the questions. And it made me feel so good because I found out I had received the affirmation that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing."
That's cool.
Yeah. So, I think that the book, it is kind of my calling card for what I do because it shares what I do. But it's helped me step even more into not just teaching marketing, but I've been really actually in my marketing groups, I've been mentoring them in business for a long time and just not owning the title.
Yeah, it sounds like you're a life coach, Ruthie.
I know it does, doesn't it? Should I get training now or just keep going? Just free will.
Do you need certification if you're already? Your book's the life coach package right there.
That is true. That is true. But yeah, so since then, I have moved along a little bit farther into retreats for empty nest entrepreneurs. And we had our first one in April with my business coaching group. And then now we're doing it again in September. And I love group coaching. I love working with these women and helping them figure out what their next step is. So that's been fun to develop.
I like the idea of knowing that something like that is being planned by a fellow introvert, because what I find is that it means that the person planning it is more aware and in tuned to when people need space or how much downtime they need. And one of the things that's exhausting for me about some group coaching situations is that the extroverts want to go nonstop
Yeah.
And so someday I'm going to come to Florida and be part of one of those coaching groups. And I will link in the show notes for anybody who wants to connect with you so that they can be on your list,
Sure.
so that they can find out whenever you have group coaching or those retreats.
Awesome.
I'd love to know what has surprised you in the whole, like, let's say in the last 10 years. How has God shown up and surprised you in some way?
The way he speaks to me, it's not audible, and it's not all the time, but there are some definite thoughts. I even listed some of them in the book. And if I pay attention, he probably would speak to me more, but that's when he speaks. And it's almost like it's a complete thought. And so I'll give you an example. In this whole caregiving journey, there have been a lot of hard times. There have been so many hospitalizations and rehabilitation centers and doctor's visits and just so much. And one day, I took my mom to one of her many appointments, and it was a difficult one for her, and it wore her out. They were making her lay down and sit up and lay down, sit up, and she's not as mobile as she used to be. And she was almost in tears by the time it was over, and I was exhausted. And I had to put her shoes back on her and tie her shoes. And when I bent over, it was like this impression. I'm right here with you, Ruthie.
Mm.
And it was as I was serving her, as I was tying her shoes. And I just thought back to the passage about cups of cold water and serving others and washing the feet of others. And I took that thought and I wrote it in my iPhone notes, and I carried that with me the whole rest of the day and the next day, thinking, okay, I know that you are, but for you to kind of give me that impression and remind me, I just felt the goodness of God. And I have several times since then.
It's so beautiful when God shows up in the middle of those everyday moments. We don't have to have the week at the ocean or the retreat in the mountains or all of those things that we would maybe love to do. But in those hard moments when God shows up, it gives us what we need to keep on going. And I love that example. Thank you for sharing that. Caregiving is not something that I have stepped into yet. My parents live nearby. They are independent in their own home, but they are starting to have some of those health challenges. And so I'd love to hear, for the person who's in that, just a few words of wisdom that you can offer to encourage somebody who's either right in the middle of caregiving or just stepping into that phase of life.
Sure. Well, my parents started early, almost simultaneously, health crises. Mom had a stroke. Dad had a car accident. Mom broke her clavicle. Dad did something else. I mean, and I was 44 years old when it all started. I'm an only child.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So I was it. And I about lost my mind because I was also homeschooling my last two children in high school. And I got so worked up in a dither because I was like, I just got to get them well and get this over with. And I didn't realize it was only the beginning. There were so many health issues that were uncovered through that whole thing. And the two of them I couldn't even send them off for one of their appointments. The other one would just sit outside and not even like go in and talk to the doctor and stuff. And I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to do all this now. And it just completely messed with my schedule. And I was like so offended that I was like, I am too busy for this. What is going on? And I was just I really let myself get upset and all in a dither because this was not what I wanted. And it was not on my plan. It wasn't on the schedule. So what I want to say to the listeners out there, whether you're just starting, whether you're in it for the long haul, is that I had to come to a point where I consented to the plan. And that was another time that God spoke to me. And I was super upset in a hallway. I couldn't get an answer from a doctor. It was like no one was listening to me. And I broke down in the hallway. And as I gathered my wits together, it was like he said, Ruthie, this is the plan now. And once I accepted this is the plan now, then I girded up my loins and I was able to go. But, that didn't make it easy. There's been so many tough times. It's been hard. Almost 15 years now we're doing this.
Wow. Yeah.
But I will tell, I would like to tell the folks out there to get help as soon as you can get help, because I did this on my own for 10 years until my dad was he was getting dementia, and my mom, who still has a very sharp mind, she broke her hip. At the same time, this was 5 years ago, and at the same time, my husband was being treated for prostate cancer. So I almost went into orbit again. And I called their financial advisor and I said, is there any money? Because I have to have help. Dad is at home wreaking havoc. He's lost his dentures. I can't be there with him and chase down doctors to talk to them about my mom's hip. There's so much going on. And so that was the beginning of being able to get help. And so now for the last 5 years, I've had help. I've been able to get away with my husband and travel again. My dad passed. That alleviated a lot of things because he was a lot. But just get some help and don't try to be Superwoman and don't try to be a martyr. It's good for you to get help.
Thank you for that advice. As I look to that next phase, I am a little bit terrified because I am kind of a control freak about my schedule. And I'm a little worried about how tight I pack it right now. And so that is a good word of caution to me that God is probably asking my next step to be learning some flexibility.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you will learn it in the caregiving season because it's like you just have to show up for whatever emergency happens next.
Speaking of being prepared for whatever happens next, in my compilation book, This Reimagined Empty Nest, you wrote a chapter about your kids coming and going from home, and it sounds like the transition from having them home to having them fully on their own came with a few ins and outs. Is that an accurate summary?
They're always moving back. Like they never really leave. Everybody has moved back at least once. But I will say I've loved it. Even some have moved back and they had grandkids with them, but it's just, the thing is, God has blessed us with a giant house. We built this house, we raised our kids in it, and we've been able to add on an apartment for my parents and then fill out the basement and put a garage under that. So it's huge. It's a huge house. And so we can accommodate our family members when they need to come back home, get a little respite, or they're building a house or, whatever. And so, honestly, we're not full-fledged empty nesters even right now. My youngest and her husband live with us, but that's because Mom does live in the attached apartment. And my husband and I live in Florida 3 weeks usually out of every month. So somebody's got to be here. And it just really, it helps them. They're in ministry. And so it helps, and like they love it when we come home. That's the great thing. They love it when we're here and we just hang out, and it's been good.
I don't know how people downsize because
Ugh.
Like now that our kids have kids and they live locally, but still there's times at holidays they all want to sleep over, or when they all the 4 grandchildren have to go down for a nap at the same time. I don't know where we would put them all. So I do like having kind of a sprawling big house. Your chapter in the book is Mom, You're Getting Schooled. So Ruthie, you wrote this for the person who is possibly sending their last one or their first one off to college. And then you told some of the stories of kids coming home. The food consumption alone had me like, I raising 2 boys, I recognized that they bring friends home and everybody eats. Also, what I really enjoyed was the humor you infused into your chapter. And you learned how to text because of your kids. You learned some shortcuts.
Yeah. TBH and BRB and, right. all the things that are really now they're out of date, but I thought I was cool back then, TTYL.
Right. Yeah. But thinking about that phase of life where your kids are pretty much accessible only by texting, and then it's you, the parent, on the other end waiting for them to get back to you. How did you do when you went from being able to talk to them every single day to being down to these text message abbreviations?
Well, it was tough. I didn't like that they would go dark on me for weeks at a time. Yeah. And I had to try to not take it personally. And my oldest daughter has always communicated with me, but she only lives 20 minutes down the road with her 2 kids and husband, like she is the communicator with me. She's never going to leave me in the dark. But the rest of them, they are not as on their phones as much and things. And she would be like, well, they don't, you're just going to have to give them some space. They're busy, and that. And Jim would say the same thing. He would try to encourage me with that. And so I just had to learn to not guilt them, because it was my tendency to want to do that. Like, that doesn't help anything. It doesn't help anyone. It does not help the relationship. So I just had to learn to take them on their terms. And when they were in a chatty mood, even if it was 11:30 or 1 a.m. in the morning, I was going to be talking.
Yeah, they show up and drop in and you drop everything because they're there and we're going to talk to them. You also talk about lecture-free learning, which I found relevant because one of the things I struggle with is still wanting to parent my children when they are, my youngest is almost 30 now. So how do you hold back when you want to lecture?
I just try not to say anything. It does not, all it's going to do is distance.
Yeah.
It's likely that they already know my opinion. It is very likely that your child already knows your opinion, and yet they have a will of their own, and they have to make mistakes on their own, and they have to establish their own belief systems, and God is working in their hearts on their faith now, even if we may not agree with all of their decisions. Guilting them or giving our opinions is not the way to go about it. It's just not. I am better at keeping my mouth shut than my husband is, and sometimes I have to lecture him a little bit and say, hey, but he has really grown up in this area, and we both pray about it. And I would encourage you to pray with your husband about it. Those of you who are listening out there, if you're married, if your husbands are like, you guys are struggling with this too, commit it to prayer and try to pray together about these things. And I would also, I would encourage you to journal your thoughts and just try to process your thoughts and pray, to ask God to help you get a verse and memorize it. That's going to help you keep your mouth shut. And try to keep the lines of communication open for neutral ground. Ask them and listen. Be willing to listen. Something I'm learning is to listen without judgment. Ask open-ended questions that aren't judgmental, like, are you ever going to go to church again? Don't say that. Why do you go to that church? Don't say that. You know,
you could start a whole article on things not to say to your kids.
I sure could. Maybe that'll go in the next book.
Having daughters-in-law with my two sons has been kind of funny because now I'm hearing their wives say the things that I've always been saying to them. You know, we have a little family chat and they will reach out and I just sometimes laugh and say nothing because they're just saying the things I said for all those years when they were at home. Oh, so raising kids and having grandkids, all these phases lead to a next. They always do. You know, our kids didn't stay home forever. We aren't caregivers forever. There's always something else. So has God given you any glimpses into Ruthie Gray's next, like, down the road?
Well, I haven't shared this on a podcast yet. But
are we going to get the scoop or are you going to be like, no, I can't share it yet?
I'm going to give you a little tiny.
Oh, we're going to get a hint, a teaser.
Well, I think he is showing me that it's time for another book to start on one. And I think this one is going to be traditionally published. I have a proposal in the works and a semi-acceptance in the works. And that's all I can say right now.
All right. That is cool.
So,
and the really cool thing about it is that when you see God show up in your yes before, then it leads to braver and bolder things of being able to say, well, he showed up and he proved that that was exactly the new purpose he had for me. So I don't know about you, but I found that it kind of empowers me to be like, okay, what do you have next? I'm excited about this.
Yes, exactly. That's something I talked about a lot in the book was fear and courage and leaving a legacy. And one of the quotes is, with action comes bravery. So way back there when God was asking me to write publicly, I was waiting for the spreadsheet. I was waiting for the personal invitation. I was waiting for all the steps to be laid out for me. And I was scared to do that. I was waiting for courage. But you're exactly right. The more I step out, like this retreat has been a big deal for me to do because we're full blown. I mean, it's in this really nice situated on the water in Treasure Island, Florida, which is in St. Pete. And we are pampering these ladies, you know, and it's kind of out of my comfort zone, but yet my husband's like, we're going to do this. I'm going to help you do this. And so it is exciting when you realize that you're right exactly where God wants you to be, and he wants you to continue to take moves. God doesn't steer a parked car. We've all heard that. Mm-hmm. And so the more I do it, the more exciting it gets, and the more I am surprising myself these days at my boldness to ask for things, and not just God, but actual people, you know, and like, I want to be on your podcast, you know, and you know, just reach out and say, hey, I know you've been clicking on my retreat links. Would you like to come? Are you going to come? Would you like to talk about, you know, things like that? Not being, you know, high pressure or anything. But
you're not stalking people.
No,
or anything.
I can tell when people are interested. Just want to take it. So
just for the record, Ruthie Gray still has boundaries.
Yes, yes, for sure. I'm not going to come knock on your door. Will you come to my retreat? But yeah, it is. It's exciting. It's exciting that, and so you never know where God's going to. I mean, if you are sitting at home thinking, I could never do that, just take the first step, because you're going to be surprised once you start saying yes to the Lord, how exciting it is, because if you are delighting in him, he is fulfilling the desires he planted in you. And it's for others and his glory. And it just brings so much joy. Do it.
That is the perfect nugget to wrap up. So I want to know, how can we connect with you? Because I know you have a couple of places out there. So where do we go find you, Ruthie?
Well, if you want to find the book, just go to ruthiegray.com. That is my book landing page. If you want to get familiar with my marketing school and my services there, and the podcast is Authentic Online Marketing. And you can go to AuthenticOnlineMarketing.com. I also have a parenting blog called RuthieGray.mom.
That's the one that always sticks in my head.
Yeah. And that's, oh man, I have so many. That's where I got the basis for the chapter that I wrote for you was Dear Mom, Dear Parents of College Students You're Getting Schooled. And I reworked that. Thank the Lord I had something to pull out of thin air. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff about empty nesting and even young parenting over there. A lot of places.
Good stuff out there. So listener, definitely connect with Ruthie. Thank you so much, Ruthie, for spending some time this afternoon with me and chatting with me and our listeners. And for everyone listening, I will link in the show notes so that you can find those links. But RuthieGray.mom just sticks in my head all the time. Maybe because I've seen it so many places and I wondered how in the world you got the .mom, whatever.
Well, it's one of those technical names. It's one of those technical things that I figured out over on Namecheap.
Nice. Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Ruthie. I've enjoyed talking about serious matters and some lighthearted ones today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. This has been fun.
Thanks for tuning in to Midlife Repurposed. Looking for more inspiration and connection? Dive into Midlife Repurposed on Substack, where you'll find resources, weekly reflections, and a community of like-minded women. Visit midliferepurposed.com to join the conversation and keep the journey going.